So, just to finish up what I was saying before, here we have a close up of St. Teresa, and we see that line between spirituality and piety really getting blurred with physical sensation and sensual sensation there. I mean, she definitely looks like she's in a state of ecstasy, right? And there's a close up, as if you couldn't tell. All right, back to my face. Couple things we'll talk about in terms of the next point of reading that we have from Jonathan Edwards, and that's Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God. And this is one of the classic hellfire and brimstone sermons, especially within American Lit. And this is where we really get to see Jonathan Edwards as this very methodical theologian, taking one verse from the Bible and from it teasing out all of these implications about what it means. And if you look on page 390, the verse that he's coming from, that he's going to be working off of, is Deuteronomy 32:35. And that verse is, their foot shall slide in due time. And think about, the general emotional and mental tone of what we saw in personal narrative. It's uplifting, it's personal, it's sweet, it's inspirational. Here we get the other side of the coin when he's talking about other people's experiences. I mean, he puts himself in that large group too, but he's definitely putting the fear into people. One of the other great, fire and brimstone sermons, if you enjoy 20th century Brit Lit, is in James Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. And if you haven't read that part, just look up Blue Funk, Portrait of the Artist, and you can get that sermon there, and that'll bring you down too. And here what he does, starting on page 390, is he talks about all these different things that can be drawn out of that statement. And starting on page 391, it's ideas such as, we were always exposed to destruction. We're always inclined to fall. We don't know when we're going to fall. That we are liable to fall of ourselves without being pushed down. We can fall all by our good selves. The only reason we haven't fallen already is that God has not made it our time yet. And it goes back to God's will again and again. And God is powerful enough to make us fall, or to take away that which is preventing us from falling. And from all of that, he even goes far to say, well, what are some of the things we can get out of this? Can we conclude based on these notions? Well, that human beings deserve to be in hell. Divine justice, has no qualms about putting everybody in hell. Hey, look, there's our cat. There's Figaro. Speaking about devilish cats. Look at him. All right. Get back there. He's looking out the window. We get some hummingbirds around here. He also says the objects that we are, or humans are, the objects of the same anger and wrath of God that is expressed in hell. The other thing I want you to think about are, once again, the physical, sensual, visceral imagery that he's using, this time to a really fearful end. And this is on page 393, that second full paragraph that is marked 7. Think about this. It's right about in the middle there, if you want to follow along. I think it's a good thing for you to annotate. You might see it again. Hint, hint. Unconverted men walk over the pit of hell on a rotten covering, and there are innumerable places in this covering so weak that they will not bear their weight, and these places are not seen. The arrows of death fly unseen at noonday. The sharpest sight cannot discern them. So all these things, death is flying at you like an arrow. Think about, the physical, visceral experience of being shot with an arrow. Um, he goes into the last part of this sermon called the application. In other words, how do we apply this knowledge? What furthest conclusions can we get from it? Oh, there goes the cat. Again, he's bringing that visual imagery, that sensual imagery into play on page 395. That third paragraph, that partial paragraph under application, where he says, "Your wickedness makes you as it were heavy as lead, and tend downwards with great weight and pressure towards hell. And if God should let you go, you would immediately sink and swiftly descend and plunge into the bottomless gulf. And your healthy constitution and your own care and prudence and best contrivance and all of your righteousness would have no more influence to uphold you and keep you out of hell than a spider's web would have to stop a fallen rock." So in other words, it doesn't matter how good or how holy or how pious or decent your condition is, none of that means anything. It's a spider web trying to hold up a rock in comparison to God's will and also what you deserve. On the next page, the wrath of God is like great waters that are dammed for the present, and they increase more and more, ready to be let loose. One of my favorites is the bottom of it's that third partial paragraph on 396. It's talking about God's wrath, God's anger is a bow. The bow of God's wrath is bent, and the arrow is made ready on the string, and justice bends the arrow at your heart and strains the bow, and it is nothing more but the mere pleasure of God, and that of an angry God, without any promise or obligation at all, that keeps the arrow one moment from being made drunk with your blood. I try to go down on that last part. Your blood. So once again, we have this emotion, which has a physical sense to it, right? We feel anger in our bodies too, right? But somebody else's anger piercing you like an arrow and delighting in piercing you and having you bleed up so much that the arrow, this inanimate object, is getting drunk on your blood. It's delighting in it so much. That is really intense and really vivid and really creepy. And he talks about how unworthy the congregants are. On the top of 397, he says, "The wrath that the God that holds you over the pit of hell," those are the unconverted and the not predestined, "much as one holds a spider or some loathsome insect over the fire, abhors you and is dreadfully provoked. His wrath towards you burns like fire." Again, great at imagery, very effective, very emotionally moving, in a way that you could see really stirring up crowds. He actually gave this sermon on a ship when they were coming over. How would you like to be trapped on that ship? I think I had one more passage in there. I can only read so much of this before I really get put into a funk myself. Well, so I'll put it down for there. And that's just a small reminder that with Jonathan Edwards, we kind of see the high watermark of the Puritan movement be met and then begin to recede. Are there still like remnants and cultural threads of Puritan theology in American culture? Absolutely.